Right now in the UK, more people are searching online for info on vaping than for smoking. One of the most searched questions is simply, how do I stop? Well, vaping has exploded in popularity, especially among younger people, but there's still a lot we don't fully understand about the long-term effects. At the same time, governments are stepping in with new rules, including bans on disposable vapes. So what is vaping doing to your body, and should you be worried? Whether you vape or used to vape or just wondering what all the fuss is about, here's what you need to know. So vaping involves inhaling nicotine in what's referred to as an aerosol, basically a vapor rather than the smoke caused by the burning of tobacco. It's essentially a delivery system for nicotine. Vapes work by heating a solution known as the e-liquid. Now that typically contains propylene glycol, which is used in food production, cosmetics and medicines, and another stuff called vegetable glycerine that's derived from plant oils, plus flavourings, sometimes sweeteners, and most importantly, nicotine. Now, the liquids come in different nicotine strengths, so you can control how much nicotine you need. Smoking, on the other hand, involves inhaling tobacco smoke, which the NHS says contains thousands of different chemicals. Many of these are poisonous, and up to 70 of them cause cancer. They also cause other serious illnesses, including lung disease, heart disease and stroke. Crucially, most of the harmful chemicals in tobacco smoke, including tar and carbon monoxide, they're just not contained in vape aerosol. So the liquid is held in a little tank or cartridge in a vape pen. There's also sort of a heating element to vaporise it and a rechargeable battery. Maybe the best way to answer this is to say that there's now good evidence that in general, vaping is less harmful than smoking. That's because people who vape are exposed to fewer toxins and they are present at lower levels than smoking cigarettes. So the NHS advises that switching to vaping reduces exposure to those toxins that can cause cancer, lung disease, heart and circulation problems like heart attack and stroke. But vaping isn't risk-free. The NHS advice is that non-smokers and young people under 18 shouldn't take up vaping. Part of the problem is that vaping just hasn't really been around for long enough to know the risks of long-term use. Probably the best we can say is that while vaping is less harmful than smoking, it's unlikely to be totally harmless. That's why children and non-smokers are advised not to start vaping. And if you are vaping to help you stop smoking, you should aim to eventually stop vaping too. What we do know is that nicotine is highly addictive, but it doesn't contain the harmful toxins that are associated with that tobacco smoke. But you also need to make sure you know what is in your vape. A few years ago, the BBC asked experts to analyse the contents of 18 disposable vapes, which are now illegal in the UK, that had been taken off school pupils. Most of those vapes were illegal and unregulated, and the results showed that pupils using them could be inhaling more than twice the daily safe amount of lead and 9 times the safe amount of nickel. Now, the World Health Organization says that high levels of lead exposure in young people can affect the central nervous system and brain development, so it's really important to only use regulated, legal vapes. Well, the really big difference is the exposure to those 70 or so toxic chemicals that are linked to illnesses like cancer, lung disease, heart attack and stroke. So experts say it's all those toxic chemicals contained in cigarettes, such as tar and tobacco, that cause almost all the harm from smoking. So while vaping may not be risk-free, it's much less harmful than smoking. This is really interesting. When you first inhale a vape, the heating element really quickly warms the liquid, turning it into vapour. Then, as you inhale, that vapour sort of cools down rapidly. It mixes with air to form a dense aerosol of microscopic droplets, which you then draw into your mouth, your throat and your lungs. And when the vapour gets into the lungs, the nicotine is almost instantly absorbed into the bloodstream, gets pumped to your heart and then to your head, where it triggers an almost instant release of dopamine and adrenaline. Now, all that can happen in as little time as 10 to 20 seconds. It's really, really fast. Even nicotine-free vaping is not harmless. Inhaling the liquids that carry the nicotine, plus the flavourings that many vapes use, can still cause throat and lung irritation. Now, one very recent but pretty small study of young people who vape or smoke cigarettes showed their breathing capacity was reduced compared to those who've never smoked or vaped. But it's still really early days and more research is needed. Vape calories are the idea that the carrier agents in the e-liquids, the propylene glycol and the vegetable glycerine, now they contain about 4 calories per gram. So is it possible that when you inhale these vaporized liquids, you're taking on these calories as well? So a single puff of a vape uses about 0.05 millilitres of e-liquid, a tiny amount, which equates to less than 1/4 of a theoretical calorie. So that's next to nothing. You probably use that much energy just thinking about whether to vape or not. Your brain uses loads of calories, and then just picking up the vape and inhaling, our bodies are burning calories all the time, even as we sit around thinking. Not to mention that you can't really absorb calories through your lungs. They bypass your digestive system, so they aren't converted into fat. And the same applies to sweeteners that are contained in some vapes. They don't contain real sugar, so they don't add calories. Children, those who are 17 and under, and non-smokers are advised not to start vaping. It's really useful for those who are trying to give up smoking, but most of the concern is over young people who've never smoked but have been using vapes anyway, particularly the now banned disposable vapes that were unregulated. Now, back in 2023, I met a 12-year-old girl who was vaping so much she ended up in a coma after her lung collapse. She already had asthma and she was vaping a lot. It was like the first thing she did in the morning when she woke up. It was the last thing she did at night. But nonetheless, it was a really scary moment for both her and her mum. The NHS advice on this is that vaping is much less risky than smoking when you're pregnant. But again, it's relatively early days in vaping research. What we do know is that vapes don't produce tar or carbon monoxide, the two main toxins in cigarette smoke. Now, carbon monoxide is particularly harmful to developing babies. The vapour from an e-cigarette does contain some of the potentially harmful chemicals that are found in cigarette smoke, but they are at much lower levels. So if vaping helps you to stop smoking, it's much safer for you and your baby than continuing to smoke. So quitting vaping, so giving up the highly addictive nicotine, now that can be a real challenge. The expert advice is to gradually reduce the nicotine strength of the e-liquid in your vape, but, take it gently and pay attention to how much you're vaping. Then increase the time between vapes. So if you normally vape every 20 minutes, experts advise trying to extend that time and only vape every 40 minutes instead. Or you can use nicotine replacement therapy like patches, for example, to help wean you off nicotine. OK, so over 18s are the only people who can buy vapes, but there's no law on how old you have to be to use them. In other words, there's no specific law on possession or use of a vape, just a ban on sales. So organisations like the RAC say that in the UK, vaping while driving is not illegal, but if you lose control of your car because you were vaping while you were driving the vehicle, or it distracts you from the road, or it obstructs your view, you could be fined or worse, but there are no laws that ban e-cigarettes or equivalents when you're driving. OK, some workplaces ban vaping, as do pubs, but it's really down to the individual venue or workplace. I have to say, I've yet to be on a plane where they say vape away in the same way that smoking is banned. So vaping isn't as simple as safe or dangerous. It kind of sits somewhere in the middle, and there's still a lot we're learning. If you're trying to quit or just thinking about starting, the key is understanding the risks and making informed choices. The health experts' advice would be vaping is far less risky than smoking, so if you're a smoker, try vaping to help you give up, but if you're a non-smoker, don't start vaping. And if there's a health topic you want us to tackle next, let us know in the comments.